Atul, thanks very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Infrastructure is often cited as a problem in India, and many of the high-profile infrastructure issues like airports and roads in urban areas are often talked about. What would you say is maybe one of the most important infrastructure stories that's not being talked about enough?
Well, I think one of the most important stories really has been the development of rural infrastructure in India. India, unlike China, we really addressed it from the rural level first, and then have now moved to the urban level and in between urban centers. So the development of highways at the rural level, connectivity, because really highways is all about connectivity. If you don't have a road, or sorry, a rural road, you can't get to a school, you can't get to a hospital, you can't get your produce to market. So the government really for the last 10 years has been dealing with a lot of those issues at the bottom of the pyramid. We're now seeing traction happening at the top of it.
What would you say is the greatest impact of that lack of infrastructure in rural India? Which sectors suffer the most?
Well, agriculture, 70% of India's population is still directly involved with agriculture, and when you have the 40% of perishables being lost because they cannot be taken to the market, or the lack of a cold chain because of lack of connectivity, that sector has really been hammered consistently. The recognition that we need to fix that has really now gained a lot of currency in India, so we're going to start seeing some significant traction over there.
What kinds of things do you think will change?
What will change is the ability for children to go to school rather than, in some cases, walking 10 kilometers a day. What will change is people getting to hospitals for medical attention much quicker. You'll start seeing a lot of economic activity taking place at the rural level rather than pure migration to the urban centers, which has its own problems. So I think we're going to start seeing a significantly different India in the next 3-4 years.
And what kinds of things do you think need to happen in order for these improvements to take place? I mean, are there significant policy changes that are in the future, or?
Policies are all in place. Okay, it's the implementation which we're lacking in. It's the ability or the governance issue that needs attention. It's the systems that allow these programs to get rolled out that need attention. There is a lot of attention now being given because the electorate has become very smart. They are electing back representatives who have delivered on their promises rather than voting purely on caste or religious lines as used to be in the past. So you're seeing a significant shift in the way the rural resident is really addressing his political mandate. And that is really resulting in a lot of emphasis on delivery. And I think you're going to see a significant change now.
Punj Lloyd has operations in 16 countries, I think, right?
Correct.
Including Singapore, Thailand, China, and a number of others. What lessons do you think can be learned from some of these other countries in terms of their infrastructure development? You mentioned China, and you said that India's developed in a way that was sort of opposite to how China had. What can India learn from other countries that have...
Not very much, because the Indian model is the Indian model. India has its own genius, it has its own madness, it's the rowdiest democracy in the world, it's the largest democracy in the world. It's many countries within a country, it's many societies within a society, many economic sections within that society. The fact that India is a democracy is what sets it apart from China. China is a command-control economy where the president or the prime minister or the ruling elite will issue a diktat, it'll get done. In India, all right, the debate starts after an instruction is given. Okay, it's just the nature of the Indian. Okay. Also, what happens is very often we miss successive generations of technology. So when we finally adopt it, we decide to reform a particular sector, we go for best in class. Case in point, our telecom density was extremely low. They opened it up for private sector participation, and today our tele-density is among the highest in the world. The growth, they're adding almost 100 million subscribers a year, okay, more than most countries have. Till 1982, we had 2 television stations beaming black and white television, okay, basically agrarian-based programs. We had the Asian Games in 1982, the whole country got blanketed with color television, okay. Similarly now on the highway side, one of the biggest risks in financing a highway project is traffic. The fact that India is building to catch up, okay, that's not an issue. So the financing of some of these projects has now become much easier than a lot of other countries have found. So when you go to somebody and you say that you want to finance, let's say, $1 billion highway project, You already have traffic data because really it's not a new alignment. It's an existing 2-lane being converted to an 8-lane. So you already know how much traffic of what category is traveling on that path. So India is unique. I don't think we can really learn a lesson from any other country because it is not like any other country.
Okay. Then reaching back into its own past, what can India learn rather quickly to catch up? What mistakes does it need to avoid in order to prevent growth?
What we need to really do is, I think, make the bureaucracy at the lower levels much more efficient. As I was saying, it's the systemic fix that we need. There's too many layers, too many interested parties. In Delhi itself, for example, in New Delhi, you have 3 sets of government. You have the Lieutenant Governor who controls the police and the Delhi Development Authority. You have the mayor who controls the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. And you have a chief minister who controls the rest. Okay? So now who's really in charge? And that's true for almost every city in India. So a lot of that needs to be fixed. And the Prime Minister, I know, I've been told, is looking at that seriously to seeing as to what are the systemic changes that need to be brought in.
And that filters down to rural areas as well?
It is now beginning to, because the focus of the government really is on inclusive growth. The focus is not on the few people that make the Forbes billionaires list, okay, every year, and the few new ones that come on in. But the focus is really how do you make sure that the economic activity really percolates down to the lowest possible level. And every speech by the Prime Minister talks about this. He's made corporate India very responsible to avoid conspicuous consumption and really see as to what they can do in terms of CSR.
Okay. If you had to prioritize infrastructure development in rural areas, what would you say is most critical?
I would say water.
Okay.
And simply put, because 70% of hospital beds in India are filled with people suffering from waterborne disease alone. And the Indian support system for an individual is his family and the village. So when you have somebody transported from a village to a Class B town or a Class A town, he will typically be accompanied by at least 5 to 6 people. So you have now 7 to 8 people being taken out of economic activity because of that one individual. So it's a positive and it's a negative. Okay, but that is, I think, the most significant fix that we need.
And what would you say would be sort of at the top of the agenda for urban areas?
Urban areas, I think planned growth is the big issue, because India's, I had a friend, for example, who was visiting from overseas, sitting in the front seat of the car with a video camera, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said, if I ever try to describe this traffic to anybody back home, okay, they'll never understand it, so I'm just going to play it back for them. So I think we need planned growth. We need really to have the kind of focus that New Delhi is getting on every city. That really is the biggest challenge.
Beyond improving roads or increasing their sizes, are there significant plans for development of public transportation?
Yes. New Delhi, for example, has been building out its metro system. It's gone at a record speed. By 2018, we will have 450 kilometers of track compared to London's 408. London's has taken them over 100 years to build. We will do it in 12. Based on that now, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bombay, Calcutta, and a few other cities are all rolling out their mass transport systems.
And what areas are is your company focusing on the most in terms of development?
We focus across the board. We focus on urban infrastructure, we focus on oil and gas, we focus on petrochemicals, we do a lot of offshore work in terms of pipelaying, platforms, fabrication and erection. We do a lot of work in the renewable space. We've just commissioned the world's largest wheat-to-ethanol plant in the UK. We have a large solar initiative that's panning out now. And of course, on the nuclear space, we're playing a significant role.
Right. Now, of course, in an environment like India, which you've pointed out is very unique, and there are lots of bureaucratic hang-ups, sometimes that gives rise to a lot of innovation. Have you seen examples that really struck you as innovative in terms of developing certain kinds of infrastructure? For instance, going back to the issue you raised about water in rural areas, is anyone doing something that you think is pretty significant and interesting in that area?
The whole country is. As I mentioned earlier, that if you read economic forecasts and the economists, what India must have to achieve a 6% growth in terms of power, in terms of roads, in terms of ports, in terms of airports, okay? India has got none of that. We're now talking about, it's now starting. But for the last 15 years, the Indian economy, we are now growing at over 8% without any of that. So the whole bunch of entrepreneurs are all so innovative that they found their solutions. You had somebody talking about being a vendor for BMW for their gearboxes. Now they're actually supplying out of India on a just-in-time environment. Okay, but they cannot predict when the next ship is going to come. Okay, and how soon their goods are going to actually go out. So they're dealing with best-in-class European or American or Japanese automotive manufacturing requirements, right, in a completely uncertain environment. But they found their solution. And this will be, hold true for any number of industries in India. So I think the innovativeness of the Indian, okay, is what sets them apart.
We just published a story on a really interesting project called Lifeline Express. You might be familiar with it. So, and what interested me about that was that, medical infrastructure then was piggybacking on railroad infrastructure. Are there other examples like that where you think one form of infrastructure can be used to help expand another form?
That happens in India to a large extent. We are investors in what is the largest hospital project in the world, actually, at that size. It's 1,250 beds, started up at one phase. And we're now partnered with Duke University as their research partners in India. But we have what we call medical outreach programs. So you have these fully fitted buses, okay, that go into the villages, and they'll spend weeks on end in the villages doing the initial screening of potential patients. And you have people, whether there's women with gynec problems, or there's men with cardiac problems, or diabetes, etc. And the screening happens in the most rural of rural areas. So there's a lot of that happens where you've got the best in class in the city actually reaching out to the extreme have-nots. Okay, and there's no charge, it's free, and doctors volunteer to go down from the hospital. And so these are called medical outreach initiatives. There's a bunch of these that happen.
Sort of a wheel and spoke approach?
Kind of.
Interesting. So looking ahead 5 or 10 years, where do you envision India to be in terms of infrastructure, given the current situation?
India, I believe, will look like a very different place physically, okay, over the next 5 years. We will see roads which will be up to international standards. You'll see a lot of power generation coming online. You'll see a lot of transmission and distribution coming online. Airports are now being commissioned. As I mentioned, Delhi's got a world-class airport that's come up in 36 months. Second largest in the world. 78 gates to Beijing's 80. It's the largest space, larger than Terminal 5 or anything. You're seeing Bombay under construction right now. You're seeing Chennai. You're seeing Calcutta. All have been upgraded. And you have 26 new airports that are being built. So India will look very, very different.
And rural areas as well?
And rural areas as well.
Will they lag, do you think?
No, I don't think they will lag because, as I was explaining earlier, the politician knows he has to deliver to his constituents. His constituent is not the city. His constituent is at the village level. I was in Canada recently with one of our ministers, and we were all laughing that his counterpart on the other side had a constituency of 100,000 people. The Indian minister's constituency was 1.8 million, with over 2,000 villages in that constituency. So that's the electorate he has to address. They're the people he needs to deliver to. Okay? So you're going to start seeing a huge amount of pressure, or there is already a huge amount of development happening at that level.
Well, thanks very much for speaking with us today.
It's been a pleasure.